Back live tonight here on In Focus. The DA has welcomed an interdict preventing the Eastern Cape Cooperative Governance MEC Zolile Williams from changing the Nelson Mandela Bay's leadership structure. It would have seen the metro move from a mayoral to a collective executive system. The Eastern Cape leader Andrew Whitfield joins us now for more on this. Andrew, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. I suppose a victory, not as sweet as it would have been had you had still been at the helm of the metro, because initially you had thought that the MEC is certainly bringing this to try and bring in the ANC through a back door. Well, they are now in charge via a coalition with the EFF. However, does it certainly make a difference for you, the fact that the courts have said the mayor can't just willy-nilly do this?
Well, the issue has two parts to it. The one is the interdict, where we were successful in court today, and the interdict was to prevent the MEC from immediately implementing Section 12, which would change the system of government from an executive mayoral system to a collective executive or executive committee system. And the interdict effectively prevents him from doing that until the merits of the case have actually been argued. So there's a second court case that will now proceed, where we will argue our case to prove that we believe the motivation for Section 12, according to the MEC, in our view, is irrational, and that the motives are purely political. Yeah. But that court case is still pending. So the battle has been won in the short term, but the war is still not over, if I can put it that way. And we will still need to meet in court to put this matter to bed once and for all, and we hope that we succeed.
Yeah. 64 out of 120 councillors at the time had voted against this Section 12 proposal. Well, if you look at those numbers today, do you think you would still get that kind of a vote?
Well, I think most of the parties in council who have less than 2 or 3% would certainly continue to vote against Section 12, because it would effectively mean that there would be no coalition government. It would be a collective executive, which would be constituted of 4 DA, 4 ANC, 1 EFF, and 1 Northern Alliance seat on that committee. And this effectively would either lead to an ANC and EFF type coalition together with the Northern Alliance, or it would lead to a deadlock when you have 5-5. And we believe that fundamentally Section 12 does not cure the problems that the MEC feels exist in coalition governments, and that Nelson Mandela Bay, in fact, is their testing ground to try and change the system of government in every other municipality where they are finding themselves on the back foot in coalitions. And there's no guarantee in Nelson Mandela Bay that the ANC will remain in government. They're so desperate that they've appointed a political party with less than 2% of the vote to the mayoral position.
Yeah. At the time, as you put it, the MEC was saying the coalition politics were affecting decision-making in the municipality. For example, you were saying MECO members were not attending meetings. The MECO was working with executive directors instead, and the MECO members were seeing themselves as mayors in their own rights and doing as they wish in their portfolios and so on and so forth. And he was considering this particular change as something to remedy that. How's the situation today with Mayor Gary van Niekerk in place? Is there a change in how the MECO is functioning?
Well, just a correction, I never said that there was that kind of chaos that you've explained.
No, I'm saying the MEC said this was the reason why.
Well, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the case, and that's exactly our argument in court, that will happen in court. I mean, in the last 8 months, from September until about 3 weeks ago, the mayoral committee sat every single week. There was stability in terms of decision-making. There were no backlogs on the council agenda. The council agenda was up to date. Planning, permissions, and rezonings were dealt with. And in fact, to a large extent, the political chaos was a perception rather than a reality. Yeah. Ultimately, Gary van Niekerk decided to cross over to the ANC because he decided that he should be mayor. But his own political party is trying to oust him this weekend. And so, unfortunately, the shenanigans amongst some of the smaller parties will continue. They have no interest in Section 12. I can't say much about Gary van Niekerk's mayoralty. He's just come into office. And I think he's going to find it very difficult to be a one-man band controlled by the ANC.
So you're saying, Andrew, it was not true that some of the decisions, or for example, some of the items that you're saying were passed in council were passed through special sittings as opposed to the ordinary meetings of council that need to sit?
I don't really understand the question. I mean, special council meetings happen from time to time.
Yeah.
And, you know, all I'm telling you is that in the 8 months that we were in government as a coalition, the council business was attended to, a budget was drafted, it was recently adopted, even though we were out of government, we still supported it. So there is a level of stability which effectively exposes the MEC's arguments, that coalition politics is not necessarily, you know, as unstable and disastrous as the MEC would have us believe. If that was the case, we would never have passed a budget. The council would be backlogged with all sorts of items. And that's just not the case. We left a relatively stable council situation while the administration remains chaotic and has been for the last 10 or 12 years. We believe that we did a very good job while in government and handed over a relatively clean slate in terms of the council business, which was dealt with.
Something which I suppose will come as you debate this, argue this in the court, is this view from the province that the proposal is merely to be noted in council and not to be voted on. The province saying, well, we're just notifying you that this is the decision that we have taken, and then we'll go for public participation process, and that's how this is put in place. What is going to be your argument to that?
Well, they are compelled to consult, and you know, the council has voted whether the council was entitled to or not. They did vote to express their position. I think that position must be taken into cognizance by the court, given the fact that the council would be part of the stakeholders in any public participation process in any event. But it wouldn't be the only argument that we're making. The MEC's motivation, we believe, is fundamentally political, and it remains political, and we believe that we can expose that by producing the facts and the evidence, as I've set out in this interview, around what we were able to achieve in council as a coalition government with 10 political parties. A very complex arrangement, but it's also curious that it was brought when the DA was in the mayoral seat, but it wasn't brought when the ANC was in the mayoral seat. The other argument is that Section 12 should really, if you're going to change the system of government, it should be done before a local government election. That would just make rational sense. To do it halfway through the term of office would create unnecessary instability and confusion amongst the administrators. It would require a whole new culture and approach to working, which has never been the case in Nelson Mandela Bay. And we believe that it would fundamentally contribute to further chaos in the city, whereas we really believe that there is an opportunity for us to work together as coalition partners and to agree to put the city first on key items where we can all agree that the residents of Nelson Mandela Bay should come first.
So some have weighed in and said the MEC actually constitutionally could have pursued two options. One, taking over the administration himself as province, or having a rerun. Would you have supported any of those? Well,
the two are one in the same. The Constitution in Section 139 sets out how the MEC may proceed and what different kinds of administration there are. But you can't just wave a wand and place a municipality under administration. There's a very long process that needs to be followed. It needs to be based on rational arguments. It needs to go to Parliament and the National Council of Provinces, and ultimately, if the various stages of Section 139, 1A, B, and C fail, they can place the municipality or dissolve the council, as you've set out, and then ultimately, within 90 days, have a rerun election. That doesn't happen overnight. It takes a very long time to institute such a process, and so, you know, there's no magic wand that the MEC could wave to make that happen, which is why they thought, well, let's go the Section 12 route, and we've now decided to take them to court in order to set out our arguments in that court, as I've indicated to you already, that we believe fundamentally that the motivations are not based in any sort of rational legal perspective. It's rather political, and the motives are not pure.
It was rather a slim victory for Gary van Niekerk. If I'm correct, I think it was 62 of the 120 seats that voted him as mayor. Are you saying to us that the fight for the political control of that metro continues, in a sense, with what you're revealing now, that his own party could possibly want him out?
Yeah, well, they're having an elective conference this weekend. That is their business. We are committed to being robust and strong opposition. We recently supported the passing of the budget from the opposition benches, which was a gesture of good faith to the residents of the city. We don't want to contribute to any further instability. We will support sound and rational decision-making. We will make sure that the city works by providing that oversight. We're not going to be rushing to table motions of no confidence every few weeks. I don't believe that's in the interests of the city. The ANC wanted this job. They gave it to a 3-seat party on the council in terms of Gary being the mayor. They now need to make it work. We need to hold them accountable. And the internal shenanigans of the Northern Alliance and other parties is really their business. They must, however, remember that what happens inside their parties has a consequence on service delivery and the residents of the city. And we will make sure that we hold them accountable to that.
And does that, in a sense, then not go on to make the case around the instability that coalition governments are bringing, and maybe make a case for consideration of this more constituency-based kind of leadership system?
Well, I presume you mean the committee, the executive committee.
Yes.
Well, the executive committee, as I've indicated to you, would have 4 ANC, 4 DA, 1 EFF, and 1 Northern Alliance. There would be the powers that would ordinarily be vested in the executive mayor would now have to go to council. So the committee itself doesn't have the executive powers that an executive mayor has. It would have to go to council in order to get decisions made, which would ordinarily be made by an executive mayor. And I think that the executive mayoral system, therefore, is a much more seamless form of government where decisions can be made and don't have to be subjected to the whims of 14 different political parties in one council chamber. So you don't escape coalition horse trading. You don't escape on an issue-by-issue basis the negotiations. In fact, I believe it would get even worse because political parties who disagree in the executive committee would go to council and have to negotiate with those smaller parties in any event. And so we argue, obviously, that, having an executive committee system does not automatically contribute to stability. In fact, it may lead to further instability as well as delayed decision-making because of the responsibilities which would ultimately have to go to a full council meeting instead of to an executive mayor who would ordinarily make day-to-day decisions on behalf of the council.
Andrew Whitfield, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. That is DA, Eastern Cape provincial leader there, Andrew Whitfield.